2 battalions of Air Defense Systems S-400 and 12 Sukhoi 35 fighter jets will be sent to Belarus from Russia for participation in an exercise to be held next month for testing the readiness of the Union States Collective Reaction Force, Russia's Deputy Defense Minister Alyaksandr Lukashenka said on Tuesday. Within the framework of testing the functioning of the single air defense system of the Union State, 12 Sukhoi 35 planes and 2 battalions of the Air Defense System S-400, as well as a missile and artillery battalion Panzer S will be redeployed to Belarus, Lukashenka said. He stressed that the hardware redeployment would take place during the first of the 2 phases of the readiness checks of the Union States Collective Force. The first phase will last till February 9. Military groups will be redeployed to protect the most endangered routes and key government and military facilities, as well as the Union States air border. Lukashenka said that the readiness and ability will be checked of the air defense forces on duty, including the Joint Command Combat Air Defense Center, to provide protection for key facilities in the territory of Belarus. Alongside this, he said, during this phase the military units delegated by Russia's Eastern Military Region and Belarusian forces involved will be conducting firing practice and other drills. Tactical exercises will be held at different proving grounds to practice defensive operations and struggle against illegal armed groups, Lukashenka said. Belarusian strongman Alyaksandr Lukashenka has said that joint military maneuvers will be held with Russia in February close to the borders with Ukraine as well as Eastern NATO member states. Speaking during a meeting with Belarusian military officials on January 17, Lukashenka said that the exact dates of the drills had not been determined yet. He did not specify how many troops would be involved. The secretary of the Belarusian Security Council, Alyaksandr Lukashenka, later told the Belta news agency that Russian military forces and hardware had begun arriving in the country. The announcement comes as tensions between the West and Moscow have been growing in recent months over the security of Ukraine, a Western ally that borders both Belarus and Russia. Kyiv has been battling Kremlin-backed separatists in a conflict that has killed more than 13,200 people since April 2014. Russia has deployed tens of thousands of troops along the border with Ukraine in what Kyiv and its Western allies fear could be preparations for a potential invasion, something Moscow has denied. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has continued to back ally Lukashenka in his standoff with the West over a disputed presidential election in August 2020 that handed the Belarusian leader a 6th consecutive term in office. The official election results triggered a wave of protests, with Lukashenka responding with a brutal crackdown on dissent that has seen thousands detained and most opposition politicians leaving the country fearing for their safety. Lukashenka said on January 17 that next month's military exercises with Russia should focus on a scenario in which his country's military is forced to resist forces coming from the West. Without giving evidence, he justified the drills by claiming there was a buildup of troops along Belarus's border with Ukraine, Poland, and the Baltic states. Poland and the 3 Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are both EU and NATO member states. Last week, the United States and its NATO allies held negotiations with Russia aimed at easing tensions over Ukraine, but the talks failed to make significant progress. The strategic partnership between Belarus and Russia is based on the geographic location, close historic and cultural links between both countries and peoples, economic ties and cooperation between the Belarusian and Russian businesses. Signed by the heads of states in 1999, the agreement on establishment of the Union State of Belarus and Russia sets up a legal basis for integration between the two countries. According to the agreement, Belarus and Russia defined a series of major goals to ensure peaceful and democratic development, to establish a single economic and customs area and proper legal framework, to ensure sustainable economic development, to pursue the agreed foreign, defense and social policies, to ensure security and fight against crime. Both countries move on all directions mentioned above gradually, taking into consideration the priority of social and economic matters. We develop our partnership under the unquestioned principles of state sovereignty and territorial integrity of both nations, as well as due implementation of their international obligations. Traditionally, Russia is both our key trade partner and a major export market for Belarusian manufacturers. The Allied Resolve exercises will be held near Belarus's western rim, the borders of NATO members Poland and Lithuania, and its southern flank with Ukraine, Belarusian leader Alyaksandr Lukashenka said. Set an exact date and let us know so we aren't blamed for massing some troops here out of the blue, as if we are preparing to go to war, he told top military officials. Troop movements by Russia are being closely scrutinized as a military buildup near Ukraine's borders and a barrage of threatening rhetoric have stirred Western fears that Russia is planning to invade. Read more. Moscow denies any such plan, but has used the standoff to campaign for security guarantees from the West, including a halt to NATO expansion and a formal veto on Ukraine, a former Soviet republic, ever joining the military alliance. The Belarusian leader, a pariah in the West since a sweeping crackdown in 2020 and last year's migrant crisis with the European Union, said the drills were needed as Ukraine had built up troops near Belarus. He said Poland and the Baltics had more than 30,000 soldiers near Belarus's borders.
Russia has positioned about 100,000.
Lukashenko has led the former Soviet republic that Moscow sees as a buffer state to the West since 1994 and strengthened ties with Moscow during mass protests that erupted in 2020 as the West imposed sanctions. These should be normal exercises to work out a certain plan for confronting these forces, the West, the Baltics and Poland, and the South, Ukraine, he said in comments circulated by state media. The Kremlin said separately that reports that Estonia was prepared to host up to 5,000 NATO troops showed Moscow was right to be worried. It's exactly things like that which prove we have grounds to be concerned, and it proves we're not the reason for escalating tensions, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said. He was asked on a conference call to comment after a senior Russian official declined to rule out or confirm whether Russia could deploy missiles in Venezuela or Cuba if the West refused to deliver Moscow's security guarantees. For Latin America, we're talking about sovereign states there, let's not forget that. And in the context of the current situation, Russia is thinking how to ensure its own security. We are reviewing different scenarios, he said. Separately, Russia's Western Military District said its tank army was holding command staff training exercises in 5 regions, involving 800 servicemen and more than 300 pieces of hardware, the Interfax news agency reported.